Welcome everyone. This is the video for my 6.2 section for my pre-calc class where we are covering the law of cosines, where we're solving for sides or angles of an oblique triangle. So we are going to start off with the formulas. If we are given all three sides or two sides and an angle in between, that's when we're using the law of cosines. So the main formulas for solving for a side go like this, where we have a squared equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine a. Or if we're solving for b or c, we have very similar ones here. And algebraically, if we were given all three sides and we had to solve for cosine a, cosine b, or cosine c, we call those the alternative forms, where they've algebraically solved these equations for those, and we have these three. So having these in your notes while you're going through each problem and using your calculator, we will solve for the missing sides or the missing angles that we need. And I have two examples that I'm going to show you. So we're going to start off with the side angle side case, where we have a side, an angle, and then a side. So again, that angle has to be in between the two sides. Notice again how we are consistently labeling each parts of the triangle. However you label it, just make sure that the opposite side has the same letter so that you're consistent. So seeing that we have to solve for side A, I am going to use a squared equaling b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine a. So I'm going to plug everything in, and then I will use my calculator to help solve. So a squared, b squared was 15, so I'm going to have 15 squared. C was 10, so 10 squared minus 2. B, 15. C, 10. And then cosine of 115 degrees. So I can plug all of this in my calculator just as you see it. The one thing you have to remember is that this is solved for a squared. So after you plug this in, you're going to need to take the square root of your answer, or you could put the square root right at the beginning of your computation and you can get it that way too. So I'm going to pull up my calculator and I will just start typing. I'm going to go with 15 squared plus 10 squared minus 2, and I'll use the parentheses just how as I have it here. 15, 10, and then cosine of 115. Again, making sure you're in degree mode. I will check real quick. I'm in degree mode, and I have everything plugged in, and I'll hit enter. Now again, 451.785, but I have to make sure that, again, that's a squared is equal to that. So I'm going to go second square root there to get, and then I'm going to bring up my last answer. So I can just take the square root of my last answer. And I know that side A is 21, and if we're going to round to the nearest tenth or 3 decimals, make sure you do it accordingly. For my class, a lot of the times we're using delta math, so we are going to be asked to the nearest tenth, so I'm going to do 21.3. So A is 21.3. Now, we're use the law of cosines once, and then we go right back to what we did prior to this. Is we use law of sines next. Now, if you need a refresher, make sure you check out the law of sines video that was assigned prior to. But now we have our pair. So now I will go right into using the pair of A's of 21.3 over the sine of 115. And I'll go ahead and start solving for angle B. So I'll go 15 over sine of B. I'm going to cross multiply. So 21.3 times the sine of B is equal to 15 sine of 115, and then I'll divide by 21.3. That'll get me the sine of B. And then what I need to do with this is take sine inverse to get angle B. Sine inverse of 15 sine of 115 over 21.3. And so I'll go back to my calculator. So second sine, make my fraction, 15 sine of 115 divided by 21.3. Close off the parentheses, and I'll see my angle B is 39.7. So angle B is 39.7. And then the last thing I need to solve for is angle C. So all I have to do then to find angle C is take 180 minus 115 plus 39.7. So I get my 180 minus 115 plus 39.7. And we'll see that we have 25.3 for angle C. So that helps us with the side angle side case. Again, we use law of cosines. We just did it once, and then we went right back to law of sine in order to find the other parts of the triangle. Okay, so that's our first example. Our last example we're going to look at is the all three sides are given case. When you are given all three sides, it is very important that you start with the biggest side first. The biggest side is going to yield the biggest angle. So that means we're going to use one of those alternative forms. So find which side is the biggest. Opposite that will be the biggest angle. So I'm going to start with cosine C equaling the following. And now I will plug in as I see fit here for cosine C equaling A squared. So I'm going to have 14 squared, B squared, 8 squared minus C squared, which was 19, over 2 times A, 14, times B, which was 8. And remember that in order to solve for C, I'm going to have to take cosine inverse of both sides, because cosine inverse here will cancel, and cosine inverse now of all of this. So I'll pull up my calculator, and I will use now cosine inverse, so second cosine for the inverse. I will make my fraction, and then I'll have 14 squared plus 8 squared minus 19 squared on the top. And then on the bottom, I'll have 2 times 14 times 8. And then I'll close all this off. And this will get me my angle for C, which is 116.8. So I wind up with 116.8 for that. Now, just like in the previous problem, now I have my pair. I have both C's, and I can go right back to solving with the law of sines. So I will start with 19 over the sine of 116.8 equaling, and then you could pick which one you want to solve for. I'm going to solve for A. So I'll have 14 over the sine of A. I'll cross multiply and get 19 sine A is equal to 14 sine of 116.8 divided by 19. So again, remembering that I will have to take sine inverse of 14 sine of 116.8 divided by 19, and that will get me angle A. So I'll go to my calculator. I'm going to go sine inverse. I'm going to make my fraction. I'll get 14 sine of 116.8 divided by 19. close off the parentheses, and I'll get angle A to be 41.1. So A is 41.1, and then to get angle B, I'm just going to add them up and subtract them from 180. So 180 minus 116.8 plus 41.1, and I'll wind up getting 180 here minus 116.8 plus the 41.1, and my last angle will wind up being 22.1. So that is how you use the law of cosines. Remember, though, again, we only used the law of cosines once, and then we went right back to using the law of sines. If you need a refresher for that, check out the YouTube channel for the video on the law of sines. I appreciate you tuning in, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't done that.